I'm just give us one more minute. I'm just waiting on Mr. Charles to return. Ready to begin? Her Excellency Dame Paulette Louise, Governor General Emerita of St. Lucia, Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. June Suma, our esteemed lecturer, Mr. Nicholas Devaux, the family of the late Mrs. Patricia Charles, Mr. Gordon Charles, other members joining us here this evening, and of course, other family members joining us online. Tutors and administrative staff of the UWI Global Campus St. Lucia, Ms. Diana Williams, and members of the Student Guild Executive, UE colleagues from across the region, friends, good evening, and a warm welcome to all of you joining us this evening, whether here at the UWI Global Campus St. Lucia site or virtually from across the region and beyond. This evening, we gather once again as a community to celebrate the legacy of Mrs. Patricia Ellen Charles, who served with distinction as the 4th UWI resident tutor in St. Lucia from 1963 until her retirement in 1977. This evening's lecture marks the 12th in a series that started way back in 2010 with Dr. Hollis Urban Lester Liverpool's riveting discourse on crime and calypso. And of course, we know him better as the mighty chalk dust. Over the years, we have hosted many distinguished speakers, including Her Excellency Dame Paulette Louise, who is here with us this evening. And tonight is no exception. And we look forward with much anticipation to Mr. Nicholas Devaux's presentation on the ladyboats and the impacts of World War II on the Caribbean. However, before we move on with the proceedings, I ask that we first pause to remember our student, Miss Joy St. Omer, whose funeral service took place earlier today. Against all odds, she persevered and was near the completion of a BSc in economics when her young life was brutally cut short and decades of yet untapped potential extinguished. We extend our deepest condolences to her family and ask that everyone please stand to observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect. Thank you. May justice prevail, and may her soul rest in eternal peace. While she was here with us in her adopted island home, St. Lucia, Mrs. Charles was acutely aware of how incredibly heavy it was to watch potential go unfulfilled, whether due to self-limiting beliefs, an unsupportive environment, or external tragedy. She understood only too well the gap between what our Caribbean people are capable of and the reality facing them on the ground. A reality where even now in the 21st century, the English-speaking Caribbean still records the lowest tertiary education enrollment rate in the Western Hemisphere, with the Eastern Caribbean experiencing some of the most critical deficits. The goal of at least one graduate per household, still a distant dream for many. Mrs. Patricia Charles, who we honor here this evening, dedicated her life's work to unlocking the potential of the peoples of the Caribbean. She worked assiduously to break down the barriers which created a chasm between those who could afford full-time study at the UE and those who could not, between those who lived in or near landed campuses in Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados, and those who lived in the non-campus countries. Along with her fellow resident tutors, she fought to bridge this gap to ensure that the residents of the Eastern Caribbean could find a place in the UWI's mission to unlock the potential of the region's populace. Thanks to Mrs. Charles and her colleagues, the Challenge Examination Scheme would become that bridge, spanning the geographical divide between the Mona campus and the countries of the Eastern Caribbean. It was a bridge over which students were steered into the UWI's degree programs by a network of committed resident tutors without whom the scheme would not have been successful. It is a bridge that has stood the test of time and which now uses modern digital architecture to connect formerly isolated communities to a world-class education. Today, we continue to stand on the shoulders of Mrs. Charles and her fellow resident tutors. Online portals, interactive platforms, and virtual support systems now bridging students' journeys from where they are, balancing work, family, and location, to where they want to be, academically and professionally. As resident tutor for St. Lucia, Mrs. Charles became deeply involved in development work in her adopted homeland. Her interests were many and varied. In addition to her role as resident tutor, she was actively involved in the creative and performing arts, heritage tourism, and the Regional Council for Adult Education. She was also instrumental in founding the island's National Research and Development Foundation, NRDF. Long after she had formally retired from the UWI, Mrs. Charles continued to serve our campus as a member of the Open Campus Council from 2002 to 2009, and as chair of the UWI Open Campus St. Lucia Advisory Committee. She continued to work for the Open Campus up until the day she became ill. Her last experience with us was in her official capacity, attending the 2009 induction ceremony for Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of the Open Campus, Professor Hazel Simmons MacDonald, who is now also gone to her rest. Mrs. Patricia Ellen Charles gave selflessly and with generosity to all the causes with which she became involved. Her task here is done. As we celebrate her enduring spirit and ceaseless efforts to improve the human condition, let us resolve to secure her legacy by building an intentional foundation for the next generation. I thank you. And with these few words, I now invite Ms. Diana Williams to come forward. And Diana is our former chapter chair of the UWI Global Campus St. Lucia Guild of Students. She's just formally relinquished that role, and we now invite her to introduce our guest speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Prior to 2016, Nicholas Devaux could be described in many ways: son, brother, husband, father, accountant, musician, surfer, fisherman, part-time handyman, and even comedian. Many things indeed, but historian, not so much. That all changed in 2016 when he sent his father's World War II pilot logbook to Japan to obtain an autograph. Little did he know the life-changing journey that would be set in motion. 10 years later, Devaux is now the founder and CEO of the Logbook Project, a unique initiative to further understanding of the irreplaceable losses on all sides of World War II, intended as a tribute to those whose service purchased the freedoms enjoyed today. The project has since evolved to recognize the enormous contribution made by Caribbean nationals during World War II and the pivotal role the region played during the conflict. The discovery of potentially polluting wrecks, PPWs, and ominous World War II legacy within the Caribbean has expanded the project's scope to raise awareness of this important issue. The project is presently producing a documentary called Oil and Ice Cream, retelling the Lady Nelson Umtata story within the Battle of the Caribbean and its alarming modern-day ecological risk profile. Nicholas acknowledges the contribution of relatives like Robert and Fred Devaux in preserving St. Lucia's rich heritage and hopes his own efforts will benefit all St. Lucians and the wider Caribbean. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nicholas Devaux.
For a minute there, I wondered who they were speaking about. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you so very much for coming out this evening. There are a myriad of things that you all could be doing right now. But instead, you have chosen to spend your irredeemable and finite Thursday evening with me. An enormous gesture of trust on your part. I am truly grateful, deeply, for this immense, overwhelming responsibility that I feel to give you a return on your investment, which is your time, right? Many of you have come here to show support, or perhaps to commiserate with my wife. Either way is very sweet of you. Tonight, I will define success by you leaving here with an awakened curiosity for a lesser known but deeply impactful facet of St. Lucia's history and geography and the associated opportunities and threats linked to that history. I am also thankful tonight that Argentina, Spain, and Brazil are not playing in the World Cup, because I suspect I would be talking to more chairs, but I think Mexico is playing, and perhaps that might be a challenge for the Mexican ambassador. But anyway, I have 40 minutes, and some of you have me on a tight clock. So it is really impossible to do justice to this subject matter. But all I can give you tonight is a preview. Now, some of you will be more interested, some of you less so, and that is fine. If after tonight an increased number of you check in with me on this remarkable journey, I will count that as a win. The first part of tonight's presentation, therefore, will cover the historical, and the second part will concern itself with the geographic and the modern-day environment. After that, it will be time for questions, comments, emotional outbursts. And then after that, I would like to invite you to stay for a very brief but very poignant ceremony involving somebody very dear to me who doesn't even know he's going to be on the spot yet. But I hope you will stay, because it will be a really lovely way to close tonight. All right? And so with that, thank you again, and let's get off to the start, shall we? So, the logbook. This all started, and it's so funny because as I look through this room, so many of you have been on this journey with me. And of course, Dr. Didicus Jules, my former boss at the OECS, I still recall the day when he was leaving for Japan, and I went downstairs with the logbook in an envelope, and I said, hey, when you get to Japan, could you post this for me? And he looked at me and he said, what on earth is that? And stupidly, I told him, I said, well, it's my father's logbook from World War II. I had arranged for somebody to sign it in Japan. And he looked at me with horror and he said, boy, take that home, eh? You crazy or what? What you doing? And this went back and forth, and eventually I said, look, just take it. And he did. And that was the beginning. It started just across here, actually, at the OECS. So, yes, tonight, as we said, it's about the lady boats and the legacy of World War II. The lady boats were absolutely integral to the development in these islands between the 30s and the 50s. The Caribbean was central to the way World War II played out. Yes, we may not have been, at the forefront of Leningrad and D-Day, but we were pivotal and we impacted how the war progressed. This journey has really given me an appreciation for this amazing place that we call St. Lucia and this region. It has opened my eyes. We are indeed custodians of this area, this wonderful Caribbean that we live in. And most of all, I'm sure everybody here can recall exactly where you were the day Julie and Alfred crossed that finish line for gold. Yes? Did that really happen? Was it AI? Crazy, right? But that's the world, that's the reality we live in. And if we don't capture our stories and if we don't tell them, someone else will tell them for us. And that is a huge danger. So these are my 4 points for tonight. And hopefully I will get us to that finish line, okay? So off we go. Who are we? So there I am on the left. The smartest, most beautiful person is in the middle, smartest person in my room. And on the right is a gentleman who came along, found me as I went along with my journey with my dad's logbook. His name is Lars McKee. He's a Swede, and he's even more nerdy than I am for all things World War II. But he is now a minority shareholder in what is the Logbook Project, and he is integral into our research. A lot of what I present here tonight is just as much his work as it is mine. So my dad, I'm not going to linger too long on this. My old man was a World War II pilot. Thankfully for me, he didn't actually get into combat. He got there too late, but he was fully qualified as a bomber and then a fighter pilot. He never spoke about it. I was just always fascinated. But long story short, I decided, took my fastness, and I said, let me send this book off to Japan for this signature. That is President Obama in an embrace with a gentleman named Shigeaki Mori, who survived the bombing of Hiroshima. It's a remarkable story, and I thought, how amazing would it be? Actually, it was another gentleman that I wanted to sign, but he passed away before. And so then I thought, well, let me see if Mr. Mori would sign. And he did. When that happened, the doors were blown open for my imagination. This was in 2016, and in that moment I thought, well, wow, who else is in the world that I could ask to sign this book? So for the last almost 10 years, this book has been traveling the world to people like Mr. Mori all over. And all I wanted was a signature and a chance to tell their stories. That was it. It wasn't political, so there are signatures from both sides of the conflict. And that's really, I just wanted a slice of what did you do, what happened to you. That was it. Mr. Mori here speaks about the legacy of nuclear warfare and the fact that so many people suffer from cancer and so on. It's terrible. My wife and I were fortunate enough to visit him. An amazing story. These are some of the other people who have signed it. I would recommend you look at a movie called The 6888, which is all about the all-black female battalion from America who went. Another great movie is called The Imitation Game. This is the last signature, and I must give a nod to Mr. Anthony Bristol for helping me successfully capture that one. That was Mr. Rexford Owen Thame, who is a 100-year-old Jamaican veteran, and he's our most recent signature. As I look through the room, several of you have participated with me on this journey. And the logbook has become actually an object of terror. People are horrified to even touch it now. And it's true, it really does carry an amazing slice of our history. So there I was, chasing stories around the world, right? It's a common thing. We always think the grass is greener, the grass is greener. I'm, trying to find people, literally all corners of the world, right? There are more than 270 signatures in the book. The book has traveled 360,000 miles in the last 9 years, about 10 times around the world, okay? And then this happened. So this was in 2017, admittedly early in the game. But this was one of the few stories that I actually knew about growing up. My father did not speak about the war, but the one thing he did say was, yep, submarine came in the harbor, torpedoed 2 ships, and everybody was eating ice cream. And literally, that was the whole narrative I had growing up, that of what World War II was in St. Lucia. 2 torpedoed ships and ice cream, right? I knew nothing beyond that. But this happened, and I suddenly thought, well, hang on a minute, this is crazy. What am I doing, right? So what's going on here? And then 6 months after that, this was the game changer. Sabrina Titley posted this on Facebook. And basically she's saying, I wonder if they're going to do anything with that propeller, because my mother was on, she says, that horrible night where my mom perhaps had the greatest scare of her life at age 3. So that really set the cat among the pigeons for me and my brain, because I was like, okay, here's somebody I knew. She was an acquaintance, and I had the propeller. So I was like, all right, I need to really dig into this story. And it's like Paul Keane Douglas says, who tell me do that, right? Because here I am, now all these years later, and we are still learning things about this story. Up to Saturday, a new discovery. It just hasn't stopped. These are some of the publications for persons who may want to know more about World War II in the Caribbean, which I'm not really going to cover tonight because it's too extensive. But the one on the right is a recent book by a Dominican author named Clement Richards. I only met him about 2 months ago. This is a wonderful book that would be good for like teenagers and stuff. It's really well written, it's well researched, and it's easy to read. So I do want to shout out Clement and thank him for this work. It's an important recent work, and I think kids would actually enjoy reading it. So this is a view from my house. St. Lucia is so beautiful. It really is beautiful. We are so lucky to live here, right? And from here, that's the entrance to the harbor where this all played out. And of course, over and beyond that is Martinique. Martinique, that's a whole other story. That would need another lecture by itself as to what happened in Martinique. Martinique was French. When the Germans invaded France, France fell. The governor over there, Admiral Robert, he decided he was going to support Vichy France. So overnight, Martinique became a German outpost. So we, 3,000 miles away from Europe, were overnight on the front lines. I need to introduce, at some point along this way, I didn't start out to make a documentary. I started out to do a book. But the more I got wrapped into the tentacles of this story, I suddenly realized, no, I need to do a documentary. Now, so I will explain more about the Titleys, but Mrs. Titley there was a 5-year-old passenger on the Lady Nelson on the night it was torpedoed. She is the aunt of Sabrina Titley from the Facebook post, okay? The gentleman presenting that book for her signature, which is the logbook right here on the table in front of you, by the way. This is a real star of the show tonight. That is my wife's cousin, Dwayne Crichton. Dwayne right now is understudying on the Star Trek set in Canada. That's the level of directorship he is at. So when I decided, now he got her to sign the logbook, that was early on, like 2018. When I then later on decided to do the documentary, I said, Dwayne, I have no idea what I'm doing. So he's been part of my team going forward. And then Miss Cooper, Malika Cooper, who now lives in St. Lucia. She's from Jamaica, but she's been assisting me. She's also a student of film, and it doesn't hurt that she's Jaden Charles's girlfriend. She's been great. And here she is on set, and there's Paba. Thank you, Paba, helping me to interview a lady from the Marigot area who spoke no English I mean, yeah, right, Creole alone. Not my forte. So, this is the story, this is the Titley story. So her daughter now, so Mrs. Titley signed the logbook and then sadly passed away, but that is her daughter, Nicole. Sorry? And she's holding her mother, Catherine, handwritten account of what happened that night. And it's riveting, right? And they have agreed to be the ground zero story for me in the documentary, which is called Oil and Ice Cream, and we'll get to the oil shortly. But it's a remarkable story of West Indian resilience. Their mother, in the black and white picture, was married to a minister, and they were living in St. Kitts, and they hopped on the lady boat to go down to Guyana because he was terminally ill with cancer. And she was from Guyana, so they were moving the family with 3 little children, going back to Guyana to live. And they got here on the famous night, March 1942, and their world was literally turned upside down. Within 3 months, he was dead. And she was alone with 3 little children. And she raised them and they stayed. And here's where the beauty of Castries comes in, because Castries embraced that family and really supported them, and they thrived. But it's a great story. So then, once I understood that, yeah, it was this race against time. And I became this stalker / dragnet for, anybody from that era who could tell me their story. So of course it was Mrs. Martindale, Mr. Haynes Cyril. I don't know how many of you in here may know him, but his remarkable story. On the night he was there as a scout medic, later on he joined the 1st Battalion Crib. He's a movie all by himself. Yeah. In fact, so many of these are. Doris Boland was the daughter of Rupert McNamara. Doris was one of the first people I sat down with a camera. And I went in there feeling all good about myself, thinking, I know some stuff. Well, she set me straight, because I thought I knew, and she's like, no, that's not how it happened. And she was brilliant. And then, of course, Mr. Montplaisir, who is here with us tonight. Thank you, sir. Yes. So just even today, I was having a conversation with somebody, and as a schoolmate of mine, and he called me up. He said, hey, Nick, I see you doing this thing. My uncle is wherever he is, and he has all these recollections, and he wants to call in tonight, and he remembers that on the night of the attack, they forgot to close the net, the anti-submarine net. I said, well, no, that's not quite right, because the net wasn't even existing at that time. And Mr. Montplaisir and his 2 older brothers, after the attack, was involved in fabricating the net. And he has sat with me patiently as I've probed him with questions and explained to me all about how the net came to be. But it was after the attack. And then it was just more stories, more persons. The gentleman in the lower left came here on the tugboat in the top left to tow away the Umtata. When they got off Miami, another submarine came and torpedoed the ship again. And they had to cut the cables so that it didn't drag them down with it. This is amazing. So the gentleman who came in here on the submarine to do this, his name was Albert Achilles. He was the lead, he was the commander on the submarine. It seemed he had something of a knack for this, because prior to coming here, he also did the same thing in Trinidad. He crept through the Bocas, and he torpedoed 2 ships that were not far from shore. And they went looking for him, and he sat quietly on the bottom. He even surfaced that night, turned on his running lights, and pretended to be a patrol boat, and sailed right under the American defenses. I mean, there's some serious cojones on this gentleman, right? He also did the same thing in a place called Limon in Costa Rica. And that lady in blue lived along the harbor with her family. And the night the submarine came in, torpedoed a ship called the San Pablo, and all the lights went out, and she said, and it's true, the houses are built partially over the water. She said we had like a big door that dropped fish pots down into the sea. And she said the lights went out, She was 3. Her older sister was 5. And she said, my mother just said, don't move, don't move, don't move. And sure enough, if the children had moved, one of them was going to fall through. But she came to St. Lucia, visited me. She's a signatory in the logbook, and she's part of the story. Now, this is a great story. So this is a view from Russell Lake's property behind Mondudor School, right? As you can see, it looks right down the throat of the harbor. And that is because Russell's grandmother, a lady by the name of Miss Purley, specifically chose there, all those years ago, to live, because her livelihood depended on going down to the harbor and selling her wares to the ships. So this woman was a professional ship spotter. It was her business to know what was coming in and going out of the harbor, right? On the day in question, it happened on the 9th of March. That day, what I've just put up there is a map drawn by the captain of the submarine. He spent the entire day off of Castries doing surveillance, scoping out the harbor, coming in, going back out, seeing what was the best opportunity to attack. During the day, Miss Purley's children, Russell's mother and her siblings, were in the jardin, as Russell tells the story. And they said, Mama, look, we're seeing something out there. And they convinced this woman to go down to town, to the colonial office and even the police, and say, listen, there is something out there. You guys need to investigate. She was ignored. That night, when fireworks started to go off, they sat and watched. They had a bird's eye view. The next day, a police delegation came trotting up to ask what she had seen. I won't tell you what she told. Now, this is quite fascinating. This on the right is the account. Now, all of this is online, all the logs, because we are German, we record everything, and it's really all there. These are the times. Now, the way they would record the time is on Berlin time, which was 6 hours ahead. But what I want to point out here is the duration between this 4:49 and 5:54. It's an hour and 6 minutes. That is the duration between him pulling the trigger right here in the harbor and sailing out and sitting here. So after he pulls the trigger, he zoomed out, but then he proceeded to sit here for the better part of an hour, just watching, just making sure that those ships had sunk. Even though he knew the Americans had 2 bases here, even though he expected surveillance planes, they sat just there off of Latok for about a mile out, just doing surveillance, taking notes and so on. Again, the audacity, because there was no defenses. For the first part of 1942 in this region, we were completely defenseless against these submarines. This was just after Pearl Harbor, and everything was prepared for a defense from the air. Nobody expected this onslaught to come. And it took the better part of 1942 for the Allies to get, especially the Americans, to get their act together to then eventually chase the submarines out. But in fact, during 1942, in the summer, the Caribbean suffered the highest ship losses in the entire theater of war. It was literally, you were just taking your life in your hands to go out to sea. And we'll see exactly what those numbers look like in a bit. So, yes, sorry. One of the things that's in this report, he talks about machine gun fire coming from, there were 2 sentry posts, one at Tapion, one at Meadows Battery. And the German commander makes a record of that in his notes here. And this is a report written by a man named William Armstrong, who was a Bajan police officer who was stationed here during the war. And he confirms that there was machine gun fire. And in fact, he talks here about a 303 Maxim Hardenfeld machine gun, which had been left by the HMS Good Hope in 1914. And that's a World War I era machine gun. So here you have members of the St. Lucia Police Force taking on the mighty Third Reich with a World War I pea shooter, basically, right? Because the commander actually records, oh yeah, the shells are bouncing harmlessly off. The Germans could have easily turned their guns on those gentlemen, and we wouldn't even know where to find pieces of them if they had wanted to. But that in itself is an important act of defiance, because there were 3 ships in the harbor that night. There were. And those guys came into Castries with 3 torpedoes. If he had wanted to, and with his brazenness, he could have definitely fired on that 3rd ship. He chose not to. But the fact that those gentlemen stood their ground and fired on him is important. And those are some of the stories that I'm really passionate about bringing to the fore. Because those people have sort of gone their way quietly, but I want to make a noise about them. So there's a gentleman here, Spooner, somewhere. The other thing about this machine gun, which is so remarkable, is that it comes from this ship called HMS Good Hope. Now, I don't know how many of you may know about that ship, but if you go, and I want to thank Mr. Bobran for this picture that he has furnished me with. This is the last visit of the HMS Good Hope to St. Lucia in 1914. But on that visit, about 26 St. Lucians got on that ship and sailed off into the sunset, literally. They got as far as off of Chile, and they engaged the Germans in a ferocious battle. That ship was sunk with all hands lost, including the 26 St. Lucians. Now, this is World War I. But in Castries, if you go down to Derek Walcott Square and you look at the cenotaph, all of these men's names are listed there. So, Mr. Bristol, you know where I'm going next. Because I've been asking Anthony, that machine gun ties in so beautifully from World War I to those men to World War II. It is such a vitally important, I don't know what happened to it, and I would like to go in the armory and poke around and see. And Briss there is my ticket. He's smiling because I've been asking. So we'll go. This is Mr. Armstrong, who was married in St. Lucia after the war. But now again, the other thing, of course, all of this is a product of its time. Where the lighter your skin was, the more in the front you were, and the darker you were, the more in the back. And again, what I am so passionate about is that all of those stories in the background need to come forward. They need to come forward. We need to find these people. Don't get me wrong, Mr. Armstrong has been a wealth of material, because after the war, he wanted to write a book. And I am so grateful to his son, Ron, for furnishing me with all his father's records. But I'm assuming that possibly, maybe one of these guys were the ones, I don't know, right? But that's something I would really like to celebrate with the police force. This is probably the site that would have faced Achilles as he came into port, with the Lady Nelson tucked up in the front. This is not the Umtata, but that's pretty much what would have greeted him. This, more or less, is where he would have come, not just a little in from Meadows, and then the 2 ships would have been parked up here. He came in so close that they were actually scraping the bottom as he reached the port. And again, this is all recorded. And you can imagine, again, I cannot imagine the audacity of these men and what they did. And then to pull off, to fire the 2 torpedoes, turn around, and then get out of there quickly. This, again, Mr. Armstrong's record. This is son Ron. This is home in Barbados. And, I have been privy to all of these documents. Remarkable, remarkable accounts that he has. We'd love to get them all scanned so that there can be further research. This is the only photograph, and trust me, I have looked. This is the only picture purporting to be the damaged Lady Nelson. And it comes from Mr. Armstrong's records. And again, we see all the damage here from where the torpedo took out. Now, that's important. I really want you to look at that hole, because I am going to make a connection later on with the Charles family. So remember this photograph. This, now again, it was open season. So this is a torpedo fragment from Barbados, because a submarine went in there, Carlisle Bay, and fired 6 torpedoes on a ship. The guy was so determined to take out the ship, and not quite as good as a shot as Mr. Achilles. But so somewhere in the harbor may still be 2 of these. Good. We take a water break. And now we get to the Charles family. There are 2 kinds of birthday people in the world. There are those who love to celebrate. They celebrate a birthday month. And then they have those who don't really want to know about their birthday. They've had enough birthdays. Sir J.Q. Charles opened his company on his birthday, very, very deliberately. I don't think J.Q. could have done anything else but be in business. I think that was just in the man's DNA and is what he did. But here, this is a little extract from his Articles of Incorporation for J.Q. Charles, which was incorporated on the 25th of November in 1944. So this is actually 2 years after the war. But what I want to show you is how much of this, now, JQ being JQ, JQ could have done anything in his article. When you read the articles, I mean, they cover just about everything. They probably even cover AI. Like, he just hit every single business point. It's really remarkable. But you see the stress on shipping, right? Because if you lived in Castries at this time, you were some way or shape, even like Miss Pearly. From Miss Pearly all the way to JQ, tied into shipping. Shipping was the lifeblood of this country, right? So this is his obituary, right? And this is quoted. So soon he was ready to launch his own business, trading with the lady boats, okay? So one of the things that has really troubled me is that at least 20, I want to say about 30 people died in the attack. And yet, we only know 10 names of the 30. And that really frustrates me. So, thanks to Paba, again, came to my rescue because I went in the cathedral and I looked at the registrar of deaths. And this is from the Cathedral Register of Deaths. It's dated here March the 10th. So that's the next day, all right? And this lady named Henrietta Aline, which has been confirmed for me by the Registrar of Deaths. Henrietta Aline died on the Lady Nelson. But this is where it gets interesting. Witnesses. First one, Joseph Quintin Charles, right? Which puts him centrally in the orbit of everything that happened on the night and the next day. So that, remember that photograph I showed you with the damage to the Lady Nelson? It is not inconceivable to think, and as you shared with me, right? Yes. You shared that your father would often be down by the dock, sometimes with a fever, but I mean, all that gentleman knew to do was how to make money and work, right? That was his mantra for a lot of his life. Like, that's what he did. And so it is not inconceivable to think that old man JQ could have been killed that night. And I mean, you talk about fate and, you know, none of this happens. Shock doesn't happen. And think of the hundreds of people who have been employed by JQ over the years. So, again, a very, very important crossroads in history. But this lady, there's his signature. This lady is buried in a child's tomb. So the thinking is that, so here, now we get into what the ladies' boats did and what they represented. They would go overnight from St. Lucia to Barbados to sell produce. So we think that she was working with him in that endeavor. And so, I mean, that's the end of part one. So that must have been quite a shock for him. I'm just going to jump quickly over. Sorry, I had to break these up because they get a bit unwieldy if they're too big. Now, Gordon is laughing at me because... How are we doing? Interest levels are still up? I can keep going? All right. Hey, where are we? No. Too soon. My apologies. This should have started at the beginning. Okay. So, as I mentioned, if you lived around Castries was really the generator of the income of everything that okay? It was so important. My father-in-law, Hollis Bristol, has a 100-year-old brother from Dominica who I interviewed over the phone. And he came to St. Lucia during the war. And he said to me, when I stepped off the ship onto the dock, he said you have to understand, that was like New York. Because all these other islands, not all of them, but most of them, you had to take a little boat and navigate your way to shore from a ship. It could not come into the dock. So just to be able to pull up on a ship and get off, it was a huge deal, right? So these are, next couple of slides are from The Voice in the late 30s. And the first thing you see up there is the ABC of shipping import. Every issue of The Voice has this. And basically it's a report card of, this is like, I liken this to sort of like the Wall Street Times. You know, if you're a merchant in Castries, you check in the paper to see who's coming, who's going, just like Miss Purley, right? And then here, the other thing is that socially, the newspapers of the time, it's literally like Facebook. And it's all about who's coming and going. So here, we see in the Dominica team sales today for cricket, here's Reggie Clark. Where's Sanyo? Right? Reggie Clark is the captain with V. Montplaisir, V. Cooper, which I assume is Vernon. Right? And this just continues throughout. So this is very much part of the social fabric for economics, but also it's just what's happening. Again, more notes about shipping. Here we have Dr. J. Lev Bristol, right? Departing on, which one was this? This was the Hawkins. And again, J. Bagas on the Hawkins, arrivals, departures, and so on. So every single issue leading up to the war is this kind of stuff. The post-mail notice, all tied into the ships. Now this one, I included, Trinidad government shut door to Jewish immigrants. So along with all the shipping stuff, you have what's going on in the world with the war. So you see things, articles about Chamberlain and the aggression that's escalating and so on. Again, as I went into this story, the number of rabbit holes. So, I put this one purposely, because in Trinidad and in Jamaica, you had camps. In Trinidad, it was called Camp Rented. And they rounded up all the Jews and stuck them in there. And I'm talking real World War II type, high barbed wire, bright spotlights, machine gun posts, and those people were confined in there. In Jamaica, the camp was called Camp Gibraltar, and it is now the Mona campus. There were also POWs, refugees, and so on that they're stuck in there as well. I think Trinidad was more militant than the one in Jamaica. But this is what was going on, right here in these islands. Again, this ties into the whole story of the Bajans being down the coast and so on. But again, Lady Hawkins and so on, right? So, the lady boats. What were they, why were they, and so on. So they were, for whatever reason, Halifax, Canada, decided they wanted to trade with this region. And there was a shipping line that predates the lady ships. But the lady boats were sort of an escalation of bigger, better than what was there before. And it was, so it first, second, third class passengers, what they call deckers, people who traveled overnight just on the deck, and then cargo. And so yes, so here we see, the routing. So from Halifax, some would go over to Florida, and the rest would just do this milk run right down to Guyana, turn around, and come all the way back up. And there were 5 of them. Sorry, my voice gets really dry, so I just need to do a water break. Incidentally, last week, Corpus Christi, I interviewed Mr. Mason, who I'm sure many of you know. Mr. Mason sat and spoke to me for 3 hours and never sipped any water. Anyway, I'll leave that there. He is remarkable. So yeah, there were 5 ships: Summers, Rodney, Hawkins, Nelson, Drake. These are all named for English admirals who served in the West Indies. All right? There's a whole story about the Lady Nelson. We don't have time for that, but that's how they got their names. Ships, generally, a shipping company will choose a theme. So the Umtata was part of a group of ships that were named for African rivers. Umtata was a name in Africa. It's a funny name, but that's how it got. That's where its name comes from. During World War II, of those 5 ships, 4 are torpedoed. And of those 4, only the Lady Nelson is refloated, turned into a hospital ship, and then goes on to have another amazing legacy to the story. Total deaths, of which the heaviest and most tragic one was the Lady Hawkins. But the total of people killed on those ships was just about 275. So, is Jasmine here with us tonight? No, she didn't come? Anyway.
They made a song
Yes, remember the song?
on the
God
Lady
bless
Nelson.
Lady Nelson.
Oh, you have to learn the song because it's important.
The submarine came in right in the harbor and
You remember it?
Mhm.
Yeah. God bless Lady Nelson. God bless Lady Nelson. The submarine come in right in the harbor. Bomb Lady Nelson and bomb the entire town. It was joke.
Absolute gold. Just gold. And let me tell you, I had to beg those 2 for months to talk to me because we shy. And but once they got going, and Malaika was there, that footage is courtesy. Malaika, stand up and take a bow. Thank you so much. We literally had to sneak the camera around so that they would warm. And boy, did they ever warm. I mean, this is just an excerpt, but there is so much more to what they shared with us. It was just pure gold. So, in the cemetery, there are 8 graves, 4 from the Umtata, 4 from the Lady Nelson. I see Anna is yawning. And these 4, now, again, it's a Canadian ship. So I just assumed these men were Canadians. Wrong, right? 3 of those gentlemen are from St. Kitts. And the other one, this gentleman here, whose name I forget, but he's a Bajan. And so not only were these ships integral to the development as trading and so on, but they were also employers. And over time, our people worked, and they really worked on these ships. And so the stories are starting to come out now. Oh, my uncle, oh, my father, oh, my this, my that, was on the ship. So in Barbados, they're pretty good about recognizing all of their maritime casualties. And here, this is a monument to 69 of their people who died. One of them is missing, and that's actually this gentleman over here. And we're trying to get his name now included on that. Because even though he's listed as being from the Lady Nelson, he was actually on another ship using the Lady Nelson to get back to Barbados. And so he died here. But there's a name that I've highlighted there, Sobers. Mr. Sobers, again, worked on several ships. This is a gentleman I just met recently. Some of you probably know him. Mr. Astafan, who was the former Minister of Tourism in St. Kitts, legal counsel there. His father and his uncle worked on the lady boats. And his father was actually on the Drake, or was it the Hawkins? Anyway, his uncle was torpedoed twice during the war and survived. So Hawkins was sunk by a submarine U-66. Just keep that number in mind, okay? 251 people died. And of course, these are some of the listings. It's kind of small, I apologize for that. But basically, Sobers worked, at one time he worked on the Lady Nelson, and another time he worked on the Hawkins. Now, he died on the Lady Hawkins when it was sunk. His name was Shamont Sobers. Do we have any cricket fans here this evening? Do anybody know who Shamont Sobers is? Why I'm stressing on Shamont Sobers? He is the father of Sir Garfield. All right? His son, Daniel, and I, Sir Garfield's son, Daniel, and I speak regularly. Daniel is trying to do a biopic movie of his dad, and he wants to start the film with the sinking of the Hawkins and to tell that story. We've helped him actually flesh out a lot. He didn't know some of the things, so that's been pretty fun. He shared this photograph. This is his dad. This is his grandfather, Shamon Sobers. But again, you see the setting of this photograph and how it's a product of its time, but it just reinforces these are the stories that I want to capture. These are the people that need to step forward into the light. So remember I told you U-66 sank that Lady Hawkins ship. U-66, after the attack in March, sailed into Castries. Yes. And the net that Mr. Montplaisir and his brothers and his other colleagues from St. Mary's College took so much trouble to build, U-66 sailed into Castries, and again, this is all part of the documentation here, and laid 6 mines in the port. And shortly after that, a boat came into the harbor, struck one of the mines, and blew up. The people were injured, but nobody was killed. So the harbor was shut down for at least a couple of days while they brought in minesweepers to sweep the harbor and get. Eventually, they found, I think, 4 of the 6. 2 they never could account for. Y'all are awake. That's good. But yes, 2 they never found. The good news is that these things have a shelf life. But some of you may know the story of the Island Queen, which was a ferry from St. Vincent to Grenada that disappeared overnight. Heavy loss of, it was going from Grenada to St. Vincent. It just disappeared. Not a trace, nothing. Never been found. And one of the theories is that perhaps it struck, because the mines would be laid with cable and they would break off and go floating. And so one of the theories is that that ferry hit a mine and disappeared. But there it is, U-66, right? So up in Canada, in Halifax, this is a model at their Pier 21, which is kind of like their Ellis Island for New York. This is where Canada's immigration story is a big deal. Up there in Halifax, they do about 365,000 cruise passengers a year. There's a display to the Lady Nelson, and it talks about the hospital ship. It even mentions how it was torpedoed here in Castries and whatnot. They actually have the date wrong. They have it as March 10th. It was March 9th. You will often see March 10th because the Germans were recording 6 hours ahead. So that's why you'll see the March 10th, but it actually, you clock it back 6 hours, and the strike took place at about 10 minutes to 11 on the night of the 9th of March. So again, I remember I said the story is continuously giving us stuff. Just last Saturday, I went with a team of people to do a really closer inspection of the propeller. All along, I thought it was just this worth saving, because this is obviously brass. But lo and behold, we discovered that the shaft is actually also brass. So which makes this a very different salvage project overnight. And this is something that the port desperately wants their space back. And the gentleman from the Port Authority is with us tonight. They've been hugely supportive. I've put in a proposal that suggests that this propeller should be cleaned up and moved over to Banan, where Global Ports is tidying up, and this whole story presented there and so on, right? It's not my story, it's our story. In Aruba, this is a ship called the Orenstad, which was sunk 3 weeks before the Lady Nelson. And you see how much effort they have made to go and retrieve one of the propellers, dive it up, and clean it up, and this is how it looks now. So again, these things can be connected. You know, these stories all relate. Again, and just to prove, it's a port side propeller. This is a close-up of the model. It is very much a port side. This is the ship that came in to do the salvage, and it talks about 60 feet from keel, deck, entailing port propeller and shaft, completely gone. Right? So it's a perfect match to what sits on our dock. And this is when it first came out. You see how clean it was then. It's been spent 10 years, but still it's in pretty decent shape. This gentleman salvaged over $700 million worth of shipping during the war. He was from the Cayman Islands. Just another remarkable. But he was the one on the salvage vessel that came here to St. Lucia, Mr. Reed. So that's end of part 2. Now we're going to the last part, which is the environmental part. Are you still with me? Okay, so the project really dovetailed. It dovetailed as I was going along because I was still sending the book around the world. I didn't lose interest in the rest of the war. Yes, I focused on St. Lucia, but I kept sending the book around. One of the gentlemen I met was a man named Michael Mayer. Mike Mayer's father served on a ship called the USS Mississinawa. It was a big oil tanker. That ship was sunk in a place called Ulithi out in the Pacific. It went down full of oil. In the early 2000s, that ship started to leak oil. Sank in 1944, right? The US Navy went, they had a look at it. They thought, you know what, we're going to patch this thing up and put a Band-Aid on it. Well, that didn't last. The oil came back. And Ulithi is this, pristine coral atoll and so on. People there highly dependent on fishing and so on. Within a year, the oil was back. So the US Navy went back a second time, and they realized, okay, we have a problem. So they removed 1.8 million gallons of oil from that ship in 2002. This is a well-documented, there's any amount of information. Mike Mayer himself has dove on the wreck. He has little vials of the oil. He has been a mentor and a guide for us. But here's the thing about the Mississinawa. The Mississinawa, prior to sailing into the Pacific, sailed down from the east coast of the US to a place called Aruba and took on oil there. And when it left, a German submarine was waiting to try and sink it. Fortunately, they outran the submarine. When I understood that, it really set me off to, okay, well, that ship could just as easily have been in our waters. And so, what is in our waters? So the next couple of slides are the work of a man named Paul Hersink. He's a cartologist. I'm not sure if did I get that word right? Somebody who makes maps. Cartographer, thank you. And he has dedicated his life. Honestly, they have some really nerdy people in the world. He's a really good friend. I love him to death. But what he has done is he sat there and he has mapped every sunk ship in World War II. 20,000 ships were sunk during the Second World War. So the next series of slides is going to take us through annually how that looked. The purple dots are Allied ships and the green ones are the Axis. So 1939, the war breaks out. Most of the carnage is happening around Europe. 1940, it begins to spread, sort of like a disease. 1941, it's really in the Mediterranean and everywhere. Now look at 1942. Okay. It was carnage to be on a ship in the Caribbean in 1942. It was just not wise. By 1943, the Allies finally figured out, okay, they got things going and they send them packing. 1944, you see now it's all green. The war is really being won, and by 1945, it's mop-up time over in the Pacific. And here's what it looks like for the entire war. Now, ships don't just disappear. That propeller has been sitting in our waters for the last 80 years. It's still really solid. So just like the Mississinawa, the question must come up, what is in our waters? We've had no surveys. So, where? One of the funny things is, yes, we all live in the Caribbean, but can you really define where the border of the Caribbean is? It's just an interesting question. I'll just leave that there. If you say, well, the Caribbean Sea, but okay, well, where does that leave Barbados? So, for purposes of our discussion, we have defined the Caribbean to map and align itself with what is called the Exclusive Economic Zone, the EEZ. You're going to be hearing a lot about that in a minute. More or less, this is the area that we're dealing with. Right, so let's segue a little bit. If you go just by geography of land, in the English-speaking Caribbean islands, St. Lucia ranks about number 6, with either 236 miles or 610 square kilometers. Take your pick, all right? Barbados is 2 below us. The Exclusive Economic Zone is a totally different story. Watch what happens here. Barbados jumps to number 2 with an exclusive economic zone of 71,000 square miles or 186,000 square kilometers. St. Lucia drops way down to 10th place. What that looks like on a map is this. So, pay close attention to this area here. All right? And that is what is resting in our blue Caribbean Sea. More than 300 ships sunk. Most of them during 1942. Every one of those ships has a story. Right? Thousands of people died. West Indians. Yes, a lot of foreigners, but a lot of our story. So that book that Mr. Clement wrote, what is starting to happen, and we knew this was going to happen when we started to go public with this. Oh yes, Uncle so-and-so, this one, that one. They're starting to come out now. And we want to catch all of them. Because they're our stories. So, look at Barbados though. Barbados, by virtue of its massive economic zone, has at least 20 World War II wrecks. So, it's up to 200 miles that you can explore and use marine resources, fishing, oil and gas. And what is Barbados doing right now? Okay, good. And hello, I'm not here to decry drilling for oil, right? We need oil. That's not what this is about. But I do have some things that I want to share. So, based on our research, and this is where my partner Lars comes in because he's really amazing. What we have looked at, and this has gone through a lot of iterations, is that in the Caribbean there are 23 oil tankers. Now these are just the oil tankers, huh? We're not even focusing on the rest of the ships for now. We're starting with the big issues. 75 million gallons between these 23 ships have gone down in the Caribbean. Remember the Mississippi, right? The rest of this is more lighter stuff that has probably diluted and so on. But this is what we're paying attention to. Now, around Barbados, within those 20 ships, there are 4 oil tankers. 14.9 million gallons of oil went down between these 4 ships. And not a survey, not a nothing, not a peep. We don't know. Now, obviously, I'm not here to tell you 14 million gallons of oil is down there. It's not. A lot of it was burnt off, leaked off. But we don't need a lot of oil to cause a problem. And eventually, what is down there will be released one way or the other. What we want to avoid is a spontaneous collapse of the hull and then a release of whatever is left on it. That's really what we don't want to happen. Because even a small amount of oil can cause problems, right? And it's just a matter of saying, listen, this happened. We sure did not cause this. And of course, this is where people start to look at the ceiling and the floor in the international community because and that's a whole other dynamic. The other thing is, remember, all I wanted was a gentleman to sign this book, That's all I wanted. I didn't ask for all of this, but as this story just kept going and going and going, and it wouldn't stop. It still hasn't stopped. The next thing I was like, oh my gosh, so really now I have to go and get involved with the deep sea community? What the hell do I know about that? So Barbados has just commissioned this vessel, the Celtic Explorer, to do a 5-year bathymetric survey of their exclusive economic zone. They have already mapped about 25% of their seabed. And they're actually going a lot faster than they thought they would. So we are trying to wave our flag and say, listen, guys, you're out there, you're doing the work, you got 20 wrecks down there. Please, just be on the lookout. All we want them to see, to tell us if they see anything so that we can mark it, to then engage other parts of the deep sea community to go down and survey. That's all. That's all. I'm not telling you don't drill for oil, none of that. I'm just saying, here's an issue. We at least owe it to ourselves as custodians to know what's there and how, if it is going to be an impactful thing somewhere down the road, how do we mitigate? That's all. So, I'm going to give a prize to anybody who can tell me where this is. That's a place called Aves Island. Aves. That structure was put there by the Venezuelans because they want the economic zone around it. It's all about oil. During World War II, the Caribbean was a massive, just as today, the largest refineries in the world were in between Aruba and Curacao in the world. And the largest refinery in the British Empire was in Trinidad. Of course, the Germans knew this, and all they were waiting for was for the war to start with the Americans to come in and start hammering away, which is exactly what they did. It's always been about oil. These are some studies, again, so when I began to understand, oh my goodness, I have to now go and insert myself in the deep sea community, we did. And so we have, our network has grown. I'm not going to bore you with all those details, but this is a study done, some modeling where, and this is a further shipper. This is not even one of the closer ones. If it were to go up, this is what some of the forecasts are saying in terms, and it gets very technical and so on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, nor am I trying, listen, in the year 1999, you guys will remember people running around telling you that on the 2000, the whole world was coming to an end. This is not a Chicken Little story. All I am saying is that we just need to go and evaluate. There is enough of a mess out there that we in this part of the world need to understand what is there. That's all I'm saying. So there's this ship called the Dawn that comes into St. Lucia. I went and took the captain out to dinner one night, and I showed him my logbook and I told him my sad story. And that gentleman started to open doors for me in the international deep sea community, like dominoes falling. Next thing I knew, I was on a plane headed out to Malta. This is just, well, this is an example of the Exxon Valdez, right? The issue here is what you don't want is this. The cleanup for Exxon Valdez was $7 billion with a B, and that was 1989, okay? So that's really what we're trying to avoid. This is the kind of stuff they do. They go down, they survey, blah, 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 right? It's really, it's amazing and it's exciting. And this stuff can be live fed into classrooms. I mean, I'm excited to bring this to the classroom and turn our young people onto this kind of stuff. Get them in tune with our ocean space and to see the technology in real time, in use, you know? So, there's this significant issue of awareness. That's all I'm saying. We just need to be aware. But, you know, I have a friend who's a marine biologist, and she's very deadpan, and I went and I spoke to her about this. And in her deadpan way, she said, gee, thanks, Nick. It's not like I don't have enough to worry about with sewage and microplastics. Now you're telling me about PPWs. Thank you very much. Right? Because that is a thing. We are overdeveloping the north, and we're not paying attention to our sewage. The sewage infrastructure in the north cannot handle what is there now, and we continue to bombard it with more rooms and more rooms. Where is that going? You know, there's some development questions, fundamental development questions that we have to ask. What are we doing? This was a ship that sank off of Beaufort. It was just another here. So, all right, so where am I going with all this? Well, the war tourism market is presently valued at $500 million, forecast to grow to just about $1 billion, 5.7% growth. So here we are, a cruise port, 1 million visitors a year, bumping up once global ports gets to, and really, we're not going to tell them about this story? That seems a little silly to me. So I like the idea of a tour. Pearl Harbor derives $157 per person. I'm not suggesting we can generate those numbers, but I am pretty sure that out of 1 million people, I could get a couple of them to go on a tour with me regularly. And that's what I'm trying to develop. We start at Meadows, we go to the cemetery, we go to the propeller, and so on and so on. Behind, so these are the boys they used to float the net. This is the health center in Laquamengo. And there are 3 of them. Janine Compton, National Trust, was the one who pointed these out to me. And they are full of hypodermic needles. All right? When we get the propeller sorted out, finally, we hope to go and salvage these and make them part of the presentation. But why they are there is because stuff was going on in Marigot Bay. This is all part of another presentation, but basically the guys needed food and water because they had enough to last. It was a 6-week tour, but they needed to replenish. And so submarines were spotted in Marigot, which is part of why Papa came so kindly with me to interview that lady. We were after that story. That was a heartbreaking moment because I was really after this story when I understood what was going on here. And the day I found out a gentleman had told stories about it, when I said, I'll come and interview him right now. And they said, well, he died last night. That was hard. So here's our national anthem, Fairest Isle of the Earth. I think we can all relate to that statement. But there are 5 references to land in our national anthem, not one to the sea. And when you add our coat of arms, there's another one. That's 6. Now, our flag is a total home run, right? But it just, this is a mind shift. Yes, we are St. Lucia and we are land, but we need to start thinking about our ocean. We really do. We need a shift. Love that flag. And so here again, this is actually a little painting at the port at, what's the other, La Place. Thank you. But again, I have one last thing to show you, but again, I hope that, we have touched on the integral nature of these lady boats to the development, that we were heavily involved in World War II, that we are custodians, and that we need to tell our own stories. So that's the bulk of the presentation. I have one last thing to show you, but yeah? So Mr. Streaming, this is the part, right? So because you guys came out, you get to see this. People online will not. They're going to watch your reactions as we go, all right? So I'm going to show you an introduction to the documentary. And oh wait, I need to kill that. Hold on. Kill the lights a little bit.
What you are about to see is based on years of dedicated research. Although these events played out in the Caribbean, they were set in motion thousands of miles away, involving countless persons across several continents. Despite a decade spent combing through records and capturing eyewitness testimony, hundreds of related stories remain untold. What we have discovered, however, is filled with intrigue and surprises, including a modern-day environmental threat that we in the West Indies did not create. In 1942, our region was ambushed and violently immersed into a world at war. Overnight, our blue Caribbean sea was darkened with burning oil, echoing with the screams of dying sailors. Most of the carnage occurred offshore, out of sight and outside of memory. But in St. Lucia, a deadly attack exploded in plain view. Over time, its scars faded into forgotten whispers, until a huge propeller emerged from the depths, a solemn time capsule with a story to tell, the story of oil and ice cream.
So I do really want to thank, because so many of you have been part of this journey with me, right? I'm gonna forget Joanne, and just so many of you. Susan carried the logbook, got a signature, was scared every minute of the day carrying the book. Dr. Jules took the book all the way to Germany, to Japan. He got it started. So again, I've shared this journey. Is not my journey, it's our journey, it's our story. And so I'm really passionate about bringing it to the fore and recognizing the sacrifices that people made. So again, my thanks to you for coming out tonight. Did you get a good return on your investment? questions, comments, and emotional outbursts?
Hidden in Barbados's massive marine space are billions of dollars worth of oil and natural gas, potentially a game changer for the economy. Through the launch of the Barbados 2026 offshore direct negotiations, the island is seeking to exploit those resources. It intends to license up to 19 available blocks across highly prospective areas of our shelf and ultra-deep water acreage. Acting Prime Minister Simon says the pre-qualification process commenced June 1st and will be governed by the Offshore Petroleum Act Cap 282A as amended.
We have done seismic surveys, two-dimensional seismic surveys and three-dimensional seismic surveys. And they would suggest to us that we have the potential of having perhaps as many as 13 or more billion barrels of potential oil, and then 40 plus trillion meters of cubic feet, of natural gas.
All right, so they're going after this. It's a fact of life. And I just think, Dr. Jules, that we in this part of the world need to at least understand what the risks are and have a serious discussion. I mean, we are an oil region. That's the bottom line, right? Guyana is producing, Barbados is ready next. Who's to say we don't have as well? And what mitigation is there in case we have a spill? Whether it's from those ships or whatever, right? But so that's it. So again, folks, I thank you so much. I don't know if there are any questions. As I say, questions, comments, emotional outbursts. Now is your time.
Hi, my question is very simple. What about the ice cream?
Awesome question. So, yeah, so the lady boats, because of what they were, they catered to this. In fact, I have a little menu that I got online. It's an actual lady boat menu. This is from 1951 after it came back into service. And I mean, the program of music is all classical music. It was very button-up fare for the first class. And in here is vanilla ice cream. So, among with other things. So yeah, one of the things I didn't go into in depth today, when those ships were sunk, of course this is 80 years ago in St. Lucia. It's austere times, right? People are just scraping by. All of a sudden, this ship with all this first-class goods sinks. A riot broke out. The Americans came in and somebody got shot. But because there was no cold storage, ice cream proliferated. And everybody in Castries the next day, including my dear father-in-law, where is he? One Hollis Bristol participated in the ice cream. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, today is his birthday. Today is his 92nd birthday. So anyway, when we get to it, but he doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to invite Hollis to come up and sign the logbook before we leave today. Mr. Moplesey has already signed, so I'm grateful to him. But yes, that is the story of the ice cream. So thus oil and ice cream, right? Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for that. And on the point, if I was going to say something else, but I'll talk about the ice cream. My mom, God spare her life, is going to be 91 in August. Wow. And she said, when they bombed, I've always remembered her saying this when growing up. When they bombed the Lady Nelson and the Umtata, it wasn't just only ice cream. It was powdered eggs.
Correct.
And she said they had ice cream and powdered eggs for days and days and extra days.
Well, probably the powdered eggs. The ice cream.
So I wanted to just, the Island Queen.
Yeah.
They never found the wreckage.
Nothing.
So, which they thought they would have gotten if it had been torpedoed.
Right.
So the theory that they are putting now is that is what's called dead water.
Yes, I know that theory.
Kikam Jenny is the underwater volcano that's north of Grenada. And what these underwater volcanoes do, the chemical reaction, because Kikam Jenny erupts all the time, is the most active volcano in the region. There's now a zone around on the surface of the water that ships know not to move into that area because the water has no buoyancy. It supports nothing. And so the theory now is that the Island Queen moved into that zone and just dropped like a stone.
Yes, yes.
So
that is one of the theories.
that is
Yes,
the
you're absolutely
theory
right.
for the Island Queen.
One of the mysteries. Mm-hmm. Without proper analysis, it could be either, right? Don't forget, we as a region, again, our region, in addition to the wrecks, we are heavily industrialized in oil production anyway, all around Trinidad, off the coast of Venezuela. And if Barbados adds itself to that, there's umpteens amounts of oil infrastructure in the water already. The oil industry is a leaky industry. Again, I'm not here to decry it. So, but to your point, Anselm, that oil could be sourced from, without us going to assess, we just don't know. We don't know. It's expensive. I don't even know what Barbados is paying that company to do that assessment, but well, you heard the minister say about you see, they're after the hydrocarbons, and there's obviously a lot, and so they're making the investment.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's good to see you moving into becoming a historian. I also know that you're a quadrille dancer.
No.
So I know lots about you.
That is fake news.
But I want to thank you for bringing to life what Derek Walcott wrote in The Sea.
Yes.
That the sea is our history and that the sea is also our renaissance. Let me speak to the history part because of the fact that it is not only these ships that are in our waters. Remember, St. Lucia was involved in 14 colonial wars. So there are other ships also. Our waters are like a graveyard for ships.
Yeah.
And so there are lots of other rabbit holes that you have to go down.
No.
Into.
No, ma'am. No.
And I'm very excited to see what you'll come up with there.
No.
Because quite apart from the fact that it's a graveyard for ships, it is also a graveyard for us, our people.
Correct.
Many of us went down into those seas, starting from enslavement up to.
Absolutely.
So yes. I think that you have other rabbit holes. I don't care how you resist it. So you have to do that. But how is that work going to influence? I always want to see the impact of history.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going to impact our Renaissance as we now grow towards looking at cleaning up these graveyards? How is your work going to influence that? And how are you going to make that happen? Thank you.
Boy, that's a tough one. So what we have found, so remember I told you I took the captain out for dinner and he started to open doors for me, and it's true, he did. In the international community, they, of course, Wepukau, right? They all, because this is all over the world, so they are looking after the ships in their waters. All of a sudden, I stuck up my hand and said, guess what? We have wrecks here too. And it was like all the spotlights turned on me. You have ships? Tell us about your ships. And then I was off to Malta to talk about. So they have really embraced this information. They really are. But in terms of really now moving it to another level, even for them internationally, because it's so expensive, it's tricky. What I have found, though, is there is a lot more right now, interest in dealing with those legacy, especially the slave legacy, that's an easier sell right now. Nobody really wants to hear about PPWs. And don't forget, the oil industry, those guys just want to stay offshore and drill. When I show up talking about, it's very cagey, Again, I keep saying, I'm not here to decry. But to your point, June, and it's a great point, that is, of course, tell our story, and it's there. And you're right. Other people are already coming to me and saying, but there was a ship, an Indian ship, that sank in Castries. Nobody died, but it's the wreck is still there, and so on and so on. I'm sorry, but I have had to put on my blinders because I can tell you, we just discovered the shaft for the propeller is made of bronze. I didn't know that, and I've been going there for years. So this story, I trust me, tonight what you got was the sanitized version. There is so much more to this that I just can't share with you tonight. It will be overkill. So no, the stories are everywhere. They're out there. I encourage, if this work inspires others to take up that mantle, then as Gordon would say, yay team, right? But great question, thank you. And I cannot quadrille, no.
Well, I'm hoping this is the end of it, so I'm just going to say thank you for this. I had an uncle and a granduncle who both served during the war, but my uncle did not really go far. He didn't fight, but I have a picture of him in his uniform, so I can't say what regiment that is, but we have his picture in his uniform. He said he never fought in the war. My granduncle he went into the war and he was on a ship. So the stories about this was, so I was sitting here and when you started this little movie, I was just getting into the thing to wait to see the ship blow up, and I know how AI, and you just left me. I enjoying you leave me panting. So you just teased me there. And Dawn is there making my life miserable and telling me, even if we are regulars, we can't get everything. But I was waiting for, doom, 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 and I'm waiting to see boom. But thank you so much for tonight.
Thank you. Yes, Gordon is reminding me I'm waiting for the financing to finish the rest of the movie. Really, this was a sales pitch. Because it takes a lot to put it all together. By the way, everything you saw there, except for the submarines, everything else you saw there was filmed around the Castries area, all of it, right? Yes.
Nick, I just have to say that I wanted to put myself in the position of your father, to imagine if you'd be here today and witnessing that. This is what you've presented to us tonight. And you've done it before, I know. I've been through this, and even longer when you had the Remembrance Day lecture as well. And then I'm just thinking, he must be thinking, my gosh, I dodged a bullet. I survived the war. I told this boy about ice cream, and he's just taken this and turned this into 10 years and maybe going who knows how much longer on it. But I'm pretty certain he'd be immensely proud of you and what you're doing. And I think as a St. Lucian, I'm really immensely pleased and proud of the work that you're doing, because it's global, it's profound, and it's really what we need more of to really awaken our sense of self. My mother was born on July the 3rd, 1940. And for many times I wondered, she was born in Barbados. Her father was Barbadian, her mother was St. Lucian. And it's because I think her grandmother used to be back and forth on the Lady Joy. All right, there was a Moplesi boat, and heading to Barbados. And I always thought, that was a very dangerous time to be going back and forth all that time. And you kind of explained, well, if she was born maybe 2 years later in 1942, it might have been a very different story. The war hadn't really gotten to that point as yet. And I just noticed Dr. Suma is sending you to become a U-boat captain, because you now have to be going down into the water looking for wrecks and whatnot. And I know there's so much more you can say about this story, but one of them that struck me in doing some research, and I came across this article in The Voice, and I think it's from 1938 or 37, where there's this German training ship coming to St. Lucia.
Yes.
And on that ship was this very same Albrecht Achilles, right, who was coming around, and there was somebody writing about, we're so naive, we're allowing these people to just be going around and we don't know what could happen in the future. And then lo and behold, 4 years later, he is shooting torpedoes into the harbor. So it really is an amazing story. And I'm so very pleased that you're showing how it can even be valorized in today's society. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of comments. Very enlightening lecture. I really enjoyed it. And you really went into some things. I was at your Remembrance Day lecture, but you went into some things that you didn't mention there, and I'm glad I came here to hear about this. So there's that. And also what you said about the Americans. Really, after Pearl Harbor, they should really have listened to the British in terms of their submarine defense. These guys had the experience for that.
You know, hindsight is always 20/20.
Yeah,
So.
Really. But the British had, what, 2 years, almost 2 years of experience with that already. So they wanted to learn the hard way, basically. And you've given me 3 more books to read on my long reading list of books.
Read the last one first, you'll enjoy it.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned the 6888. As you mentioned that, I recall that I've had it in my Netflix wish list for so many months now. I just have not gone to watch it yet. I guess I'm going to have to make some time in the near future to go and do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There are 2 of those 6888 women have signed this logbook. Yeah. I mean, this, as I tell you, that is the star of the show, because that's the stories that want to pop out of there are truly frightening. And I mean, D-Day, concentration camps, it just doesn't stop. So, yes, Mrs. Williams.
Yes, thank you. That was really lovely. If my husband were here, I'm sure by this time he would have stood up and said it, so I have to say it for him. That ice cream was blue. And Miss Laurent support, she had some of it as well, and the ice cream was blue.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It was blue. I've had other colors. Somebody said it was brown. I've been told pink. You know? Exactly, different flavors, right? But that is part of the frustration of this, is that not necessarily everything aligns. So we try and triple check from different sources, like how we had the police report and the captain's report, but not necessarily everything. And sometimes people remember things completely different. I don't argue with them because I don't remember what I had for lunch. I put on a shirt this week, and then I started to look for said shirt. That's, I know, Gordon is raising his eyes. But, so when you come 80 years later and you start knocking on people's doors and asking them to tell, so it's a mix. But sorry, go ahead. Yes, no? The other thing is it's easy to point and say, well, these people should have done this, that, and the other. I don't get into those judge matches, because we were not there. It was a different time. What happened. I'm just trying to get the facts of what happened in a world where everything is manufactured and people can AI stuff. And that's where my partner Lars is so amazing, because he's really, he's integral to get in. So what we've presented to you here is truly based on thorough research. So thanks again, folks.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, and I'm sure we can all agree that it was really riveting. You had me on the edge of my seat for the entire time, and it really was wonderful. And thank you so much for having accepted our invitation to be here tonight, and for obviously putting in so much work into preparing the presentation. So I think And of course, all good things must come to an end, and so I'm going to invite Mrs. Eulampia Polio Springer, who is our program officer, to just say a few words of thanks.
Before she does that, I really want to thank the Charles family. I am an employee. Thanks to Mr. Charles and his legacy, I've worked with this group for the last 10 years, and I have learned a lot. It is a privilege to work with them. I am deeply thankful to all of you. And they have been hugely supportive in this work. So again, thank you, Gordon. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Auntie Tony.
Well, Nicholas has done half of the work for me, so I don't have much to do again. But thank you very much, Nicholas. I too was very intrigued. I saw the topic and I was wondering, what exactly is that all about? I had never heard of all those things, so thank you very much for enlightening us this evening. Very, very good work, and I wish you all the best in getting the funding that you need to continue with what it is that you're doing. And it's a lot of work, and I hope that you can get some young people involved, more young people involved in what it is that you're doing. So thank you again very much for sharing with us. Once again, we want to thank the JQ Charles group of companies for always coming on board and for supporting this lecture series. It has always been about culture and history, and so far, as time goes by, it seems to be getting better and better with the topics that are chosen and how we are able to evolve and to get to know who we are. And thanks again for contributing not only to the lecture series, but for the nice refreshments we are going to be having afterwards, which is very important. Thank you to our regulars, the Impolettes, Louise, for always showing up, Dr. Suma, Dr. Fletcher, Dawn, always there, Mrs. Modest, even when she's not able to, Mrs. Williams, always here, always. Every lecture we have, they are here. These are our norms. And again, thank you, Nick, for bringing all those people here this evening. This is one of our best attendances. So thank you. Yes, thank you. I also want to recognize our dear ambassador friend. Again, she's always there. Our ambassador, Venezuelan ambassador. She's always there with us, another regular. And again, thank you to the family. Thank you for supporting and for being here this evening. Once again, I wish all of you the best, and afterwards we will enjoy that refreshments that we all have. Thank you once again. Good evening.